John, thank you so much for having me today. I am very interested in what you do because it's not run-of-the-mill. You
right.
are a leather worker. Is that what we would call it? Leather
Worker, leather craftsman.
Okay. But I read that your background is chemistry and IT.
Right.
So where did leather working come in?
Actually, I think the leather work came in first because I picked it up when I was a senior at Northside many, many moons ago. It was an advanced industrial arts class, and we did surveying and architecture, and one of the things they had a leather work manual and some basic tools, and I kind of picked it up, and before the end of my senior year, I was wandering around Northside with a briefcase full of belts for sale.
That's a good story. Then you went on to serve in the military. Tell me how that influenced this art.
Well, other than just doing a lot of growing up for 7 years in the Navy, I've had a lot of hobbies over the years, and leatherwork is one of those that stuck. I picked it up. I never got rid of my stuff. There were times where I didn't do a whole lot, but I've always had the tools and materials around. I took all of my leatherwork stuff to the Indian Ocean when I was in the Navy. I had a shop on the ship, and that I made a clock, as a matter of fact. It's
right over your
there.
shoulder.
And I looked at it the other day, and I said, it's getting worn. The leaves used to be green, and it's kind of all washed out. So, well, I might just take some acrylics and kind of give it a new lease on life. But
tell me how you come up with your ideas. Belts are kind of an obvious thing,
right?
But a clock, I would never think a clock with a leather face.
I guess basically you can do anything in leather. I kind of look at this hobby or this craft as a work of duplication. I mean, I rarely come up with my own design. Now, there's a couple of times when I have, but a lot of times I'll take a design and we trace it onto a piece of leather, then we cut the design and start beveling and that sort of thing. You could also do stamping. It's just geometric stamps. Those work out nicely on belts.
So that leads me now to the tools. You have the stamps, you mentioned beveling. I'm looking around seeing, just tons of tools here. How did you learn how to use these tools?
Well, it was the manual that I started with in high school. It was just real basic. It tells you how to bevel and do the carving, that sort of thing. Basically, what you're doing when you're carving leather is you're making something that's essentially two-dimensional, a flat design, and giving it some relief. When you bevel things so that the objects that are in the foreground look like they're closer than the stuff in the background.
Is that a process that took you a while to get good at, or did you have a feel for it right away?
No, it was definitely required a lot of practice, especially when you're beveling. You may be using a tool that's 1/4 inch wide, but you've got to bevel a line that maybe is curved and it's 6 or 8 inches long. The notion there is that you kind of walk the tool along the edge, just tapping, and you make one smooth line, as opposed to an impression, move it and make another impression. It gets a little choppy. A lot of times I'll practice the design on a piece of scrap leather first to see how it comes out, to see what it looks like when I'm done. And frequently when I've done that, I've made some modifications to the design, maybe stretched it out, put a little more daylight between leaves and flower buds or something like that. And that's something that's relatively new with me in leatherwork. When I was much younger, I don't recall practicing and experimenting as much, but this time around I'm very willing to experiment. Let's see what happens if I do this, or frequently I'll put a design somewhere else first. I made a holster for a fellow a couple of years ago, and his wife was into owls, and I found it. The internet is great for finding clip art, and like I said, it's a great art of imitation. You find your design and you put it on the leather and you make it look like that picture. But I asked the guy, I said, you want realistic owls or cartoon-like owls? Because there was some of both. And he goes, let's tend towards realistic, but it need not be perfect. Well, then I was looking for something else, and I found a piece of tracing film that had an old design that I'd used on a purse for my sister-in-law years ago. And it was an owl sitting on a tree branch. I said, that's perfect. So I carved it onto a piece of scrap leather, took a picture of it, and texted it to the guy. He says, that's great, let's use that. Well, then I put the design on the actual holster, and I got the scrap piece of leather out and used that to practice the painting, getting the leaf colors just the right way. And I looked at the holster and I said, I should have put 2 owls on there because they weren't really that big. And I showed it to my wife, and she always has the good idea. She says, well, just put some more tree in it. So I put a big old tree trunk down the side of it, and it turned out looks really nice, and the guy's wife loved it.
Forgive my ignorance, but when you talk about tracing the design onto a piece, how do you go about doing that? Is it an indentation, or walk me through the tracing process?
Basically, you either have you can buy things called craft aids, which are like a piece of somewhat clear plastic with a design raised up, and you just press the design into a wet piece of leather. Basically, anytime you want to carve leather, you have to case it, which means you get it really wet, and you let the water soak into the meat of the leather, and so that on the surface it looks like it's about the same color. But all that moisture is inside the leather, and then as you tool it, the impressions that whether it be stamping or carving or anything, those impressions get a darker color, and that's how you get just the kind of the two-tone effect just with carved leather before you put any stain or antique on it.
I imagine the next step is then to do either a stain or you mentioned acrylics?
I use a lot of antique, regular dyes for staining. Acrylics are more of a surface coat, it's more like paint. If I'm going to do a lot of flowers or things like that, I'll put acrylic on afterwards.
How much trial and error has that taken? You mentioned getting just the right green in the leaves, that kind of thing. That takes an artistic eye. Is that something that you had from the get-go, or was that practice as well?
If I had it naturally, I'm not aware of it. Like I said, it's usually it's the great art of imitation. And I've got a hummingbird and a cardinal on a key fob that I'm working on, and I'll just pull up a picture of the hummingbird and say, okay, what else do I got to do to it? And so it needs a little more dark or something or other in it.
What is your favorite part of the process? Why have you continued to come back to this craft?
I guess I've always liked doing it. I've always liked making things. And I think when I do custom stuff, when somebody says, I need a purse that's got this on it or something, they talk about the reveal moment. That's the job satisfaction there, is to be able to make something for a customer. It's just what they wanted.
You have so much beautiful art here. I'm wondering if you have a favorite piece or a favorite type of piece that you do?
There's a tote bag over there that I made out of bison leather, but I just made it because I was carrying drills around in my car for my day job, and they kept tearing the tote bags up. So I made one out of this bison, and I carry all the drills around in that. And that's when I sewed that all by hand.
You mentioned that's bison leather. What are the differences in the different animals, or is there a difference?
It's not so much that there's a difference in the animals. There certainly is, and you can take pieces of leather and you can see different defects in them that you can link back to the way the animals are treated. I've heard that leather from America is in good shape because we take good care of our cattle. Now they may take the hides and send them to Mexico or somewhere else to be tanned, but apparently you can tell if you've got leather from some other country where they don't take good care of their animals. It makes a difference. The biggest differences on leather is how thick it is and how it's tanned. If you're going to do carving it has to be, they tan it with bark, vegetable matter. That's why I call it veg tan cowhide. But that's specifically tanned that way so it will take water, and then you can get the impressions and you get that kind of two-tone effect. A lot of other leathers are finished with chrome salts and things like that. For upholstery leather, maybe the finish is already applied and all I have to do is just cut it out and sew it together. And they have all sorts of different types of leather. I've got some samples of stingray, and they've also done some pretty neat things with cowhide to emboss it and print on it to make it look like snakeskin or something.
Okay, so I saw what I believe is snakeskin back there. Is that snakeskin, or is it?
If you're talking about the black, white, and gray one,
Yeah.
no, that's some form of cowhide. They run it through big rollers that have the scale pattern machined into it, and then they dye it some way after that.
What is the toughest part of working with leather? No pun intended.
I think sometimes the toughest part is getting off the design and getting it onto leather. I've got a purse over here on my desk that I've been working on. The customer, she's probably been waiting for this purse for well over a year, maybe two. But it's a very custom design. She wanted the words to "It Is Well With My Soul" on her purse. And I struggled with that for a long time. I knew what I wanted to do, but I couldn't get from paper to leather. Finally, I just sat down with a piece of scrap leather and put a music staff on it, started experimenting with some tools and that, and found the right size. And I showed it to her. I said, "This is what my plans are." And then just in the last week or so, I've actually got the music on the pieces of leather.
I would imagine that's pretty gratifying when you have felt stumped for a while and then find just the right
Just
thing.
the right piece, or to find that pattern I was looking for, or something.
John, thank you so much for having me today, and your work is really intricate and beautiful. So
Thank you.
thanks for sitting down.
My pleasure.
For more information, visit leatherbyjohn.net.
Arts in Focus on PBS Fort Wayne is funded in part by